Yes, true. Nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am. But why would you say that I am mad? No, the disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. As he, above all, was the sense of hearing acute. Oh, I heard all things in the heavens and in the earth, and I heard many things in hell. So how then? How then am I mad? Now hearken and observe how healthily, well, how calmly I can tell you all the whole story. It is impossible to say how at first the idea entered the brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Well, object, there was none. Oh, passion, there was none. And oh, I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult, and for his gold, I had no desire. No, I think it was his eye. Oh, yes, it was this. Well, he had the eye of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a hideous film over it that whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold. And so, by degrees, very, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man and thus rid myself of the eye forever. And well, this is the point that you fancy me mad. but madmen, they know nothing. But you should have seen me. Oh, you should have seen how wisely I proceeded. Oh, with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. You see, I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night, just at midnight, I turned the latch of his door and I opened it, oh, so gently. And when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I put in a dark lantern, all closed, so that no light shone out, and then I thrust in my head. You would have laughed. Oh, to see how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved it slowly, very, very slowly, so that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. And it took me an hour to place my head within the room so far that I might see him as he lay upon his bed. Now would a madman have been so wise as this? And then, when my head was well within the room, I undid the lantern cautiously, so cautiously, for the hinges creaked. And I undid it just so much that a single thin ray fell upon the eye. And this I did for 7 long nights, every night, just at midnight. But I found the eye always closed, and so it was impossible for me to do the work, for, you see, it was not the old man who vexed me, no, but his evil eye. And every morning, when the day broke, I walked boldly into his chamber, and I spoke courageously to him, calling him by name, and in a hearty tone inquiring how he has passed the night. So, you see, he would have been a very profound old man, indeed, to suspect that every night, just at midnight, I looked in upon him while he slept. And upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. And watch his minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. And never before that night had I felt the extent of my powers, my sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph to think that there I was. There I was, opening his door little by little, and he not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea. And perhaps he heard me, for he moved upon the bed suddenly, as if startled, Now, you may think that I drew back, but no, the room, it was as black as pitch with the thick darkness, for the shutters, they were closed, fastened through fear of robbers. So I knew that he could not see the opening of the door, and so I kept pushing it on steadily. And I had my head in and was about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped upon the tin fastening, and the old man sprang up in the bed and cried out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still, and I said nothing. For a whole hour, I did not move a muscle. And in the meantime, I did not hear him lie back down. No, he was still sitting up in the bed listening, just as I had done night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the wall. Oh, and presently I heard a slight groan. Oh, and I knew that it was the groan of mortal terror. Oh no, it was not the groan of the pain or of grief. No, it was the low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. You see, I knew that sound quite well. Many a night, just about midnight, when all the world has slept, it has welled up in my own bosom, a deepening with its dreadful echoes, the terrors that distracted me. I say, I knew it well. See, I knew what the old man felt, and I pitied him, although I chuckled at heart. I knew that he had been lying awake ever since hearing that first slight noise when he had turned in his bed, and his fears had been ever since growing upon him. And he had been trying to fancy them causeless, but he could not. No, he had been saying to himself, "It is nothing but the wind in the chimney." Or it's just only a mouse crossing the floor, or it's just merely a cricket that has made a single chirp. Yes, he had been trying to comfort himself with these suppositions, but he had found them all in vain. All in vain, because death, in approaching him, had stalked with its black shadow before him and enveloped the victim. And it was the mournful influence of that unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he neither saw nor heard, but to feel the presence of my head within his room. And when I had waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie back down, I resolved to open a very, very little crevice in the lantern. And so I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily, until at length a single dim ray, like the thread of a spider, shot out from the crevice and fell full upon the vulture eye. It was open, wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with a perfect distinctness, all a dull, pale blue, with a hideous veil that chilled the very marrow of my bone. But I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray, as if by instinct, precisely upon the damned spot. And had I not told you that what you mistake for madness, it is but an over-acuteness of the senses. Now there came into my ear a low, or a dull, quick sound, much such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. See, I knew that sound well too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. And it increased my fury, like the beating of a drum stimulates a soldier into courage. But even yet, I refrained, And I kept still. Oh, I scarcely breathed. And I held the lantern motionless. And I tried how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the eye. And in the meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. Oh, it grew quicker and quicker and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. Oh, it grew louder, I say, louder and louder. And have I not told you that I'm nervous? Well, so I am. And now at the dead hour of the night, amidst the dreadful silence of that old house, such a strange noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror. And yet for some minutes longer, I refrained, and I kept still. But the beating grew louder, louder and louder. I thought that the heart must burst. And now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. Oh, the old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and I leaped into his room. And he shrieked once, only once. And in an instant, I pulled him to the floor and I dragged the heavy bed over him. I then smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. And for many minutes, the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the walls. And at length, it ceased. Oh, the old man was dead. And I removed the bed, and I examined the corpse. Oh, yes, he was stone dead. And I placed my hand upon his heart, and I held it there for many moments. And there was no pulsation. Oh, no, he was stone dead. His eye, it would trouble me no longer. Now, if you still think me mad, you will think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. Well, the night waned and I worked hastily, but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head and the arms. And then the legs. And I then took up 3 planks from the flooring of his chamber, and I deposited it all between the scantlings. And I then replaced the board so carefully, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could detect anything wrong. And there was no stain to wash out, no blood spot, whatever. Oh, see, I had been too wary for that. And when I had made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. And as the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. Oh, so I went down to open it with a light heart, for what had I now to fear? And there entered 3 gentlemen who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged at the police office, and they, the officers, had been deputed to search the premises. Oh, well, I smiled. For what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. Oh, welcome. The shriek
I said, was my own inner dream. And the old man I mentioned was absent in the country. And I took my visitors all over the house. Well, I bade them search well. And at length I led them into the old man's chambers, and I showed them his treasures, all secure and undisturbed, while in the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room, and I desired them here to sit and rest from your present fatigues, while I, myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. And the officers were satisfied. Oh, my manner had convinced them I was singularly at ease. And they sat, and while I answered cheerily, they spoke of familiar things. But ere long, I felt myself growing pale, and I wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears. But still, they sat and still chatted, and the ringing, it became more distinct. Well, so I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued, and it gained a definitiveness. Until at length I found that the noise was not within my ears. No doubt now I grew very pale, but I talked more fluently and with a heightened voice, and yet the noise, it increased. Oh, and what could I do? Oh, it was a low, a dull, quick sound, much such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, and yet the officers, they heard it not. Oh, so I talked more quickly, more vehemently, and yet the noise, it steadily increased. So I arose, and I argued about trifles in a high key with violent gesticulations, and still the noise, it steadily increased. Why? Why would they not be gone? And I paced the floor, to and fro, in heavy strides, as if excited to fury by the observations of the men, and still the noise, it steadily increased. Oh, God, what could I do? Well, I foamed, I raved, I swore. I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting and grated it across the boards, and still the noise, it arose over all and continually increased. Well, it grew louder and louder and louder, and still the men, they chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible that they heard it not? Almighty God, no, they heard, they suspected, they knew, they were making a mockery of my horror. Oh, this I thought, and this I think, but anything was better than this agony, anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die, and now, louder, villains! Dissemble no more! I admit the deed, tear up the planks here! It is the beating of his hideous heart. Tough to do with the cold, man. Sorry. Thanks for coming. That was the Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. One of the great 3 Poe classics we have here at the Trio of Terror in our new home, the Palace Theater. Hope you enjoyed it as much as we enjoy putting it on for you. That is it for us tonight. But if you come back tomorrow and Sunday, we also have the Black Cat and the Raven. So come back, bring your friends, and we'll hope to see you again. Thanks, guys.
In this manner for several years, during which my general temperament and character, and through the instrumentality of the fiend in temperance, had experienced a radical alteration for the worse. I grew day by day more moody, more irritable, more regardless of the feelings of others. And at length, Pluto, who was now becoming old and consequently somewhat peevish, even Pluto began to feel the effects of my ill temper. One night, when I returned home from one of my haunts about town, I fancied that the cat avoided my presence. I seized him. When in his fright at my violence, he inflicted a slight wound upon my finger with his teeth. The fury of a demon instantly possessed me. I withdrew from my waistcoat pocket a penknife, opened it, grasped the poor beast by the throat, and deliberately cut one of its eyes from his socket. When reason returned with the morning, I experienced a sentiment half of horror and half of remorse for the crime of which I had been guilty. But my soul remained untouched. In the meantime, the cat slowly recovered. The socket of the lost eye presented a frightful appearance, but he no longer appeared to suffer any pain. He went about the house as usual, but fled in extreme terror at my approach. I had so much of my old heart left as to be at first grieved by this evident dislike on the part of a creature which had once so loved me. But these feelings soon gave place to irritation, and then came the spirit of perverseness. It was this longing of the soul that offered violence to its own nature, and to do wrong for wrong's sake only, that urged me to consummate the injury that I had inflicted upon the unoffending brute. One morning in cold blood, I slipped a noose about its neck and hung it to the limb of a tree. Hung it with the tears streaming from my eyes and with the bitterest remorse of my heart. Hung it because I knew that it had loved me. Hung it because I knew that in doing so, I was committing a deadly sin that would so jeopardize my immortal soul as to place it even beyond the reach of the infinite mercy of the most merciful and most terrible God. On the night of the day of which this cruel deed was done, I was aroused from sleep by the cry of fire. The curtains of my bed were in flames, the whole house was blazing, and it was with great difficulty that we made our escape through the conflagration. The destruction, it was complete. My entire worldly wealth was swallowed up. And I resigned myself thenceforward to despair. On the day succeeding the fire, I visited the ruins. The walls, with one exception, had fallen in. This exception was found in a compartment wall, against which had rested the head of my bed. The plastering had here in great measure resisted the action of the fire, the fact that I attributed to its having been recently spread. About this wall, a dense crowd had collected, and many persons seemed to be examining a particular portion of it with very minute and eager attention. I approached it, saw upon the white surface the figure of a gigantic cat. The impression was given with an accuracy truly marvelous. There had been a rope about this animal's neck. For months, I could not rid myself of the phantasm of this cat. So, during this period, there came back into my spirit a half-sentiment that seemed, but was not remorse. I went so far as to regret the loss of the animal, and to look for another pet of the same species and of somewhat similar appearance with which to supply its place. One night, as I sat at one of my favorite haunts, my attention was suddenly drawn to some black object. I approached it and touched it with my hand. It was a black cat, a very large one fully as large as Pluto, and closely resembling him in every respect. But one. Pluto had not a white hair upon any portion of its body, but this cat had a large, although indefinite splotch of white, covering nearly the whole region of the breast. Upon my touching him, he appeared delighted with my notice. This, then, was the very creature of which I was in search. I at once offered to purchase it from the landlord, but this person made no claim of it, knew nothing of it, had never seen it before. I continued my caresses, and when I prepared to go home, the animal evinced a disposition to accompany me. I permitted it to do so, and when we reached the house, it domesticated itself at once, and immediately became a great favorite with my wife. But for my own part, though, I soon found a dislike to it arising within me. Well, this was just the reverse of what I had anticipated. But by slow degrees, these feelings of disgust and annoyance rose into the bitterness of hatred. And what added to my hatred was the discovery on the morning after I brought it home. Well, that, like Pluto, it too had been deprived of one of its eyes. With my aversion to this cat, however, its partiality for myself seemed to increase. Whenever I would sit, it would crouch beneath my chair or spring upon my knees, covering me with its loathsome caresses. If I arose to walk, it would get between my feet or nearly throw me down. My wife had called to my attention the character of the mark of white hair that constituted the sole visible difference between this strange beast and the one I had destroyed. Remember that this mark, although large, had been originally very indefinite, but by slow degrees nearly imperceptible, it had at length assumed a rigorous distinctness of outline. It was now the representation of an object that I shudder to name. It was now, I say, the image of the gallows. Alas, neither by day nor by night do I have the blessing of rest anymore. For during the former, the creature left me no moment alone, and in the latter, I started hourly from dreams of unutterable fear to find the hot breath of the thing upon my face in its vast weight, an incarnate nightmare I had no power to shake off, incumbent eternally upon my heart. One day, my wife accompanied me upon some household errands into the cellar of the old building that our poverty compelled us to inhabit. The cat followed me down the steep stairs and nearly throwing me headlong, exasperated me into madness. Uplifting an axe, I aimed a blow at the beast, which would have proved instantly fatal had it descended as I wished. But this blow was arrested by the hand of my wife. Goaded by the interference into a rage more than demoniacal, I withdrew my arm from her grasp and buried the axe in her brain. And she fell dead upon the spot without a groan. The hideous murder accomplished, I set myself forthwith, and with entire deliberation, to the task of concealing the body. I had determined to wall it up in the cellar. Well, for a purpose such as this, the cellar was admirably adapted. In one of its walls was a projection that had been filled or walled up and made to resemble the rest of the cellar. I had no doubt that I could readily displace the bricks at this point, insert the corpse, and wall the hole up as before, so that no eye could detect anything suspicious. In my calculations, I was not deceived by means of a crowbar. I easily dislodged the bricks, and having carefully deposited the body against the inner wall, I propped it in this position. While with little trouble, I relayed the whole structure as it originally stood. And my next task was to to look for the beast that had been the cause of so much wretchedness. For I had firmly resolved to put it to death. Had I been able to meet with it at that moment, there could have been no doubt about its fate. But it appeared that the crafty animal had been alarmed at the violence of my previous anger. It is impossible to describe or even to imagine the blissful sense of relief that the absence of the detested creature occasioned within my bosom. It did not make its appearance during the night, and thus for one night at least, well, since its introduction into the house, I soundly and tranquilly slept. I slept even with the burden of murder upon my soul. The second and the third day passed, and still my tormentor came not. Well, the monster in terror had fled the premises forever. I would behold it no more. My happiness was supreme. The guilt of my dark deed disturbed me but little. Some few inquiries had been instituted, but of course, nothing was to be discovered. I looked upon my future felicity as secure. Upon the fourth day of my assassination, a party of the police came very unexpectedly into the house and proceeded again to make rigorous investigation of the entire premises. Secure, however, in the insurability of my place of concealment, I felt no embarrassment whatsoever. Well, they left no nook or corner unexplored, and at length, for the third or fourth time, they descended into the cellar. I quivered not in a muscle. Oh, my heart, it beat calmly as that of one who slumbers in innocence. Well, the police had been thoroughly satisfied and prepared to depart. Oh, but the glee in my heart was too strong to be restrained. I burned to say but if one word by way of triumph, and to render doubly sure their assurance of my guiltlessness. Gentlemen, I said as the party ascended the steps, I delight to have allayed your suspicion. I wish you all health and a little more courtesy. Well, by the by, gentlemen, this is a very well-constructed house. I may say an excellently well-constructed house. Well, these walls are solidly put together. And here, through the mere frenzy of bravado, I rapped heavily with the cane that I held in my hand upon that very portion of brickwork which behind stood the ghastly corpse of the wife of my bosom. But may God shield and deliver me from the fangs of the archfiend. Well, no sooner had the reverberations of my blows sunk into silence than I was answered by a voice from within the tomb, at first muffled and broken like the sobbing of a child, and quickly swelling into one long, loud, continuous scream, utterly anomalous and inhuman. A howl, a wailing shriek, half of horror and half of triumph, such as might has risen only out of hell, conjointly through the throats of the damned in their agony, and the demons that exult in the damnation. Well, swooning, I staggered against the opposite wall, but for a moment the party upon the steps remained motionless, well, through extremity of terror and of awe. And in the next, a dozen stout arms were toiling at the wall. And it fell bodily. The corpse, already greatly decayed and clotted with gore, stood erect before the eyes of the spectators. And upon her head, with red, extended mouth and solitary eye of fire, sat the hideous beast whose craft had seduced me into murder, and whose informing voice had consigned me to the hangman. I had walled the monster up within the tomb.